You're listening to the Coach's Journey podcast, exposing the struggles and celebrating the successes in the life of coaches who are action takers and creating authentic impact in today's world. Whether you're just starting out, expanding your reach, or exploding your impact, you're in the right place right now. Stay tuned and be sure to subscribe to this podcast. Now, here are your hosts of the Coach's Journey podcast.
How can they show up with their team, with their family, with other people? And if they can feel it, which is the second component of this, if they can feel your presence, then they know that it's tangible, it's real. They don't have to think about it, they feel it. And we're like, can I give this experience to the people around me? And it will come up in conversation. It will, like, almost every time it comes up, is like, why do I feel this way when I'm in these sessions? And almost every time when clients share, is like, no, there are clients I have, they would be like, I don't look forward to the sessions, but when I'm, because it's painful a lot of times for people. When I'm in it, and like, I needed this. Like, I don't know how this happened. And when we go through the conversation, they start to realize why this is so important, because this is their space to actually a gift for them to grow.
Yeah. Well, actually, so point one and point two, being present, I think there's a big part of being present that is like the mechanics of like non-distraction and non-interruption, right? If you are in a coaching session and you've set up your environment so that you cannot be interrupted as best as possible, and you are personally undistracted during that time, then you are creating the foundation of presence. That's part of the intention you set. And then the mechanics of actually doing that, you set up your environment to be that. Just being that alone will make a difference to your client. They will notice that. But there's other things that you can do, which is point two. How aware are they? How much can they feel your presence? You can do that, and they still might not feel your presence at a higher level. You can ramp up them feeling your presence by actually dialing into them and how you operate with your body. For example, if you're on video, for example, or if you're in person, do you maintain eye contact? What is your body doing? Are you indicating your understanding? Are you repeating the things that they say to make sure that they've heard you understand them? And are you demonstrating to them that you're present in a way that they can feel? In addition to just the baseline, I'm with you, right?
The way I look at that, what you described, what hit me was that engineering your external environment and internal environment in a way so the client feels your presence fully. So whether that means that you need to get rid of your phone, distractions, and anything that might pop up, or minimizing. There are times where you can't completely stop it, but minimizing it as much as possible and setting up the environment and actually letting them know that I'm fully present here with you, and I want to make sure that everything is off. I do that in my group calls a lot more, but sometimes in my one-on-one calls, I will do that too. My office is separate from my house, and I have the privilege to do that. There was a time I didn't. So when I was working inside the home, it was hard for me to keep presence because I had to tune out a lot of the stuff was happening. I don't hear anything, so that's helped a lot. But once in a while, somebody will come in, my kids will come in, they will bring food, or my wife will come in. I have to work hard and the best thing that I found is like, hold on one second, somebody just came in, I just want to make sure everything is good, and then I'll go back to them. So we don't need to pretend that all the distractions are gone, but I think we need to do our best to minimize it. And also then there are tools that come in for you as a coach, repeating it back to them, whether you're paraphrasing or you're telling them exactly what you heard. Actually, I had a session yesterday. It was a very difficult session for my client because it was around her relationship. And pretty much most of my session, I didn't feel like I needed to do anything other than repeating back what I heard from her. And it's just, this is what I'm hearing about how you're approaching your relationship with your husband. Is that accurate? Is there something else in there? And I just kept doing that. Pretty much, I think 80% of the session was that. And at the end, he's like, I don't think because her assumption was that her husband understands her. And they've been together for 25 plus years. But by the end of the session, he's like, I don't think he understands where I'm coming from at all. Yeah. But that came from me repeating it back, because I don't think she was hearing herself when she was saying it.
Part of you being present allowed you to listen enough to understand and repeat back so they heard what they said from somebody else, from somebody being present with them, right? So they're clearly, if you're engaging with them and repeating that back, that's a form of active listening, right?
Yeah.
And that's why them feeling your presence in those kind of interactions is really critical, because people need to feel understood in your active listening. Because if you're active listening and they don't feel understood, there's still more work to do, or you're not active listening, right? And then on top of that, there's a whole other layer of not only do they feel your presence and do they feel that you're listening, but then there's like what you create together. So like one level of that is what you just described, Faisal, where you're listening and repeating back with clients. But in a session I just had, what was it, last week, I'm thinking about, where the client and I were thinking about a particular problem. And we did the active listening that we just described, which is like clarifying the problem. That's, by the way, that's part of active listening too, is clarifying what they said. Is it this or is it that? What did you mean by that? And once you have clarity, all of a sudden that opens up a whole new layer. Well, I would still call active listening, which is collaborating and exploring, which is the third critical component, right? There's your presence, there's them feeling your presence, and then there's like the actual exploring and collaboration that happens at the highest levels of coaching, where you're actually working together to figure something out. And at this level, like a lot of it comes from the client, but not all of it. The coach and the client can work together to figure something out, or to solve a problem, or to brainstorm. Sometimes I'm brainstorming with my client. In this session last week that I'm talking about, we were trying to figure something out about the way one of their business processes was working. And we kind of batted some things around, and then we started drawing on the whiteboard, and they're like, oh, I like that idea. So we went kind of in that direction. And there was like a lot of like, just like aligned and connected problem solving together. And we came up with a really great idea. And then they said, oh, this is what I'm going to do with that idea. So they took their action plan from the collaborative discussion, which is I would say another level of active listening.
Yeah, I love that. And again, I look at all this as different tools of active listening. So different approaches to it, which strategy, that collaboration will require you to take different routes. Some might be brainstorming, some might be just repeating it back to them, some might be taking them helping them process something, some might be helping them making a decision in a different way. Whatever the tool that comes in, but there is a collaborative process that happens, but it requires you to be present. It requires them to feel it, for there to be that openness, when the openness happens, there's vulnerability and there's trust in there. So then you can go more to a strategy, which is why we added it at the third level. There are a couple of things in there just that can interfere with this whole process. One might be your setting. I've listened to a lot of coaching calls from clients, especially when it comes to notes and stuff and their body language, especially when you're on video. So audio might be a little bit easier when it comes to this. I had one coach who only did audio calls, which I actually appreciated for a while, because I would actually go walk for those calls sometimes. And she would encourage that too. And another, or sometimes I wouldn't even look at the screen, walk around and think about it and go right on board. And I still have at least one client that I work with who it's completely audio. She prefers that. Yeah. But especially when it comes to video, I think it complicates. In audio, you're listening more to tonality, so you're very focused on tonal shifts and those things. But video makes it a little bit more complicated. I like the video piece because you're really looking at the body language. As a quick example, so when a client was sharing with me a couple of weeks ago, it was a very challenging thing, vulnerable thing he was sharing. He'd been working with me for 3+ years. He had never shared that with me before. And I could tell he had a hard time describing that. But when I repeated it back to him, I saw that it was mostly what I heard, but there was something missing. It was just that his body subtle shift in his body language that told me, he's like, I think I'm missing something. Is there something else in there? And then the actual thing came out, which I would have never caught that had I not paid attention to the thing. So the reason why I'm describing this, a lot of times when I'm watching coaches, when I'm listening to their calls, the way they write notes, whether they're doing this or they constantly look there, they miss things in the session. So I still take notes, less notes than before, because AI does a lot of that job. But I look at the clients while I'm usually doing this, if I'm taking notes. And plus, your body language posture matters. So there was one coach I gave feedback around, and I had some of this stuff too when I was starting out, where when he would be listening, he would like kind of lean back like this. So it would, when I'm watching, I'm like, it looks like you don't care at all. Like you're not into that. So it gave the impression, even though I didn't think that his intention was that, he was just didn't realize it. When I pointed it out, he's like, yeah, I can see why that would look like that, but that was not, and I understand, but it creates a challenge with there. And maybe you can elaborate on this piece too. So one is that, and this is a more complicated thing that could interfere with your presence and with your listening, it's your own thoughts. And I feel like that's more the advanced level of listening, and because it's been a challenge for me to grow through, is that when you're listening to a client, even if you have an intention, even if you're present, they say something and something triggers in you that makes your mind busy, or you feel something, right? In the moment, you have milliseconds to decide which direction you're going to go on. If you lose control of that and you jump into that train of thought, or worse yet, you confuse that judgment that you might have with client's life and you bring that into your session, that derails a session probably more than anything else. And which means that how aware of your thoughts are you, your emotions are you, your energy are you in the moment, and can you shift even if you make mistake? That requires an immense amount of energy, I think, and training.
I agree with that. I totally agree with that. If, for example, somebody passed away, like this happened in a session recently, a couple weeks ago. Somebody said in their life that somebody passed away, and my thoughts immediately went to a few different things. Like I have a friend who somebody passed away for them recently. People have passed away in my life, and so all these things come up for me. And then part of my bias is like, oh, they must be going through what I went through, or like, oh, I have something to share on this. Whatever the thought is. And so I've gotten better at being like, okay, this is not about me right now. Going back to Daniel's #1 rule, which is it's not about you.
You're listening to the Coach's Journey podcast.